Ready? This interview was done yesterday with Mr. Morneau after we rolled out the fall economic statement. And they touch on a bunch of things at the beginning. This gentleman here, I can't remember his name because I didn't look it up, twice asks for a date for returning to a balanced budget. And Morneau dodges that question both times by saying that other economies are jealous of our debt as a function of our economy. And this person here was kind of confused by that, but didn't push him on it. And I thought, jealous of our debt? Okay, sure. We've got a whole bunch of debt. Ontario can package it up and send it on over to them if they're jealous of it. So, and he just keeps doubling down on saying we're going to grow our economy and create jobs. So their plan, their strategy, their media strategy is just keep repeating the same lines. Just keep telling them what they want to hear or what we think they want to hear, and they'll just leave us alone. And if there's nothing else to report, then what are the quote reporters going to do? And we'll buy them off too. So that's at the end of, or that's a bit later on in this interview, but really, it's insane. He dodges the questions in the worst kind of ways, in like disprovable ways. Like the things he's saying are not true, and he knows it. Like he's looking at the numbers and probably actively looking at ways to look at the numbers creatively, let's say. Okay, so at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, they start talking about Alberta. So they're well aware that one, they're killing the oil industry. Two, they know that money is disappearing, drying up, walking out of Canada at a very, very quick pace. So, and they also don't know what to do about it. So we're going to listen to that line of questioning, and then we're going to jump ahead to purchasing the media. How to win an election when everybody in Canada hates you, by the Liberal government. Okay, but first, Alberta.
Let's talk a little bit about, you talked about it today in your remarks about the economic challenges being faced in particular in Saskatchewan and Alberta mostly, because of the oil price gap. You acknowledge there's a problem out there. How does this economic update and the measures you've announced here, how does that help Saskatchewan and Alberta deal with this particular crisis?
I think I did talk about it today because it's a really big challenge. I mean, obviously, there's a huge amount of concern in Alberta, but certainly in Ottawa as well, with this big price differential that we see for our oil and gas resources.
I mean, if it continues, it'll ripple through the whole economy, right?
Well, it's not good for anyone. I mean, it's obviously not good for the overall economy. It's particularly challenging for the industry. It's also very challenging for Alberta. So I completely understand the sense of intense concern. This is what drove us to decide to make the purchase of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. This capacity to get our resources to international markets is not a new problem. This has been a problem that's been around for a long time. We took a really important decision to purchase that pipeline so we can get resources to market. What we did today, the decision to allow businesses to depreciate their investments more rapidly, helps all businesses in all sectors in all parts of the country. So that's important, but particularly it helps businesses that have significant capital investment requirements. So if you think about the oil and gas sector or the telecommunications sector, that's really important. The oil and gas sector, they'll be an advantage to make those investments.
But how many of those companies are looking at investments in the current climate in Western Canada right now? A lot of them are shutting down, not looking at expanding.
I'm not arguing that we've got a silver bullet. I recognize that this challenge is significant. The ongoing discussions in the industry with Alberta are critically important. What I am saying is we are part of the long-term solution, creating advantage to make investments, finding a way to get our resources to international markets. These are critically important. I know.
Blah. So those are weasel words and lies. He knows that, and we all know that because we've been paying attention. So a couple of things he said. One of the things he says, accelerated depreciation, meaning they can write off their investments faster, right? So rather than 10 years to pay it off, you could say it's been paid off after 5 years. I will be honest, I tried to look into this and it got really wonky and technical, and I backed away from really going into it because it's a whole other rabbit hole. So the accelerated depreciation, I can't explain it correctly. So maybe somebody in the comments could enlighten us a little bit better than I can. But apparently it's a boon to businesses. What it sounds like, what he was saying is to big oil and gas and telecommunication businesses. So yay, Liberal government for looking out for the little guy. That was me being sarcastic, by the way. They're not looking out for the little guy at all. They're saying, hey, little business, you have to pay the full carbon tax, and we're not going to give you any tax incentives or anything like that. But the big businesses can write off their, fiber optics being laid, or their whatever they want to write off, I'm sure, in the Liberal world. It's insanity. It doesn't make any sense. It's wild. Okay, so moving ahead, 7:55, they start talking about literally the purchase of the media by the Liberals, which is packaged in this bill, in this fall update. And they talk about it here. And then we're going to listen to Michelle Rempel talk about it because it's important too. Okay, here we go. Or we'll wait for the... Really is a terrible, terrible interface.
On this, you announced measures to support a struggling media industry in this country, and already some critics are suggesting you're trying to buy off the media in an election year. There's lots of places you could have put $600 million, but you put it into support for the media. How come?
We think a healthy democracy is absolutely essential, and we cannot see a way that we have a healthy democracy without a strong and free press. Simple as that. I do not think that it's realistic to think that we will influence how journalists see us by supporting a sector that we see as important for our country. And I think Canadians agree with us. Getting good sources of information is critically important. That's why we're supporting the sector in a way, by the way, that will be completely independent and arm's length. We will not be there to adjudicate. It will be an arm's length body, including journalists, that will actually decide how we do this. That's the way we do it.
Finance Minister Bill Morneau.
So they've somehow convinced themselves that they're doing something right or something just for the Canadian people. And anybody who's been reading the CBC understands that that is not true. Anything to do with the Liberals or anything that touches their money has to be ultra left wing. If you aren't an outright Marxist or bordering communist, if you believe there are two genders, please leave the room, sir. Right? Like people are really polarized, and the reason partially is the media are pushing this at really hard. We're going to watch a clip at the end of Maxime Bernier asking Justin Trudeau a question, and Trudeau's response is telling with regard to how he phrases the response. He tries to make it seem like Bernier is against immigration when he's not. But let's stay focused on the topic at hand. Here's Michelle Rempel, and that's not the time index, so hold on. So here's Michelle introducing the stakes and what we're up against, or what she believes this legislation and money will do to the journalistic integrity of Canada and the industry as a whole.
Look, I don't care how you vote. If you voted Liberal, if you're an NDP member, if you believe in free speech in Canada, what Justin Trudeau just announced in the fall fiscal update has to be a concern to you and has to be opposed. So Justin Trudeau just announced $595 million, so over $500 million, to, quote, help Canada's media sector. Now listen to this. What this initiative is going to do is it's going to, quote, help trusted sources in the media based on criteria set by a panel of people selected by Justin Trudeau. What this amounts to is Justin Trudeau buying journalism in Canada. I'm not making this up. If you go onto the Globe and Mail, National Post, Twitter right now, everybody's talking about this. Justin Trudeau is bold-face buying journalism in Canada. So think about this. Like, if you have an opinion that is contrary to the government, how are you going to compete in this environment? Every story that comes out is going to be a grant application. Essentially, he's going to create a subclass of cocktail room circuits where journalists, compete for your tax dollars to propagate the government's message. Now look, how you and I consume information.
So I'm going to leave it right there. The whole video is worth watching. She's very passionate about it. This is, quote, a hot take. So she gets not flustered, but like not lost for words. She knows what she wants to say, but not quite how she wants to say it. So there's a couple of pauses, but it's very from the heart. And I believe she feels very strongly about this. So it's good to see. And again, I appreciate Ms. Rempel. On the whole, I do hold her to account. I hope she crosses to join Max. So, but that said, I'm glad she's the shadow minister right now as well. So I appreciate her stance on this. And the cocktail room, not analogy, the prediction of the cocktail room circuit is absolutely 100% correct. If all of your funding is hinged on these 5 people or 6 journalists who make up the bureau who gives money to whoever, yeah, how do you compete in that, right? Exactly. How do you compete in that? I do this because this is fun for me, believe it or not. And I'm glad that other people like what I do, but there are a lot of people who need to make a living this way. There are a lot of people who this isn't fun for. This would be a slog for. So I understand that as well. But all of that said, journalism and the Conservative Party of Canada and Michelle's stance is journalism needs to figure it out. Like, we live in the internet age and things are changing every day. And if the Toronto Star can't hawk its leftist ideology and get paid for it, maybe it's the leftist ideology's fault. Maybe people don't want to pay to have ideology shoved down their throat, and they want to pay even less through taxes. They want even less to be forced to pay for it, because now we're just paying for the Toronto Star garbage through taxes. So CBC belongs to us, and soon the Toronto Star and all other media that choose to take advantage of this tax break over the next 5 years. So it's $500 million over 5 years. $595 million over 5 years, which is an incredible amount of money. So here is Huffington Post piece talking about exactly the same thing. And the first part of the article kind of lays it out, and the second part of the article defends the policy and explains mathematically why they need to be bailed out. Of course, journalists need to be bailed out. It's a death spiral. Okay, so it's Huffpost says, fall economic statement unveils 3 new tax credits to save Canadian journalism industry. This measure will cost an estimated $595 million over the next 5 years. The Liberal government has unveiled its arm's length attempt to save the country's struggling news industry by introducing 3 new tax measures to incentivize Canadians to pay for journalism. Do you think they needed to include arm's length in order to get the money? Or is that just something everybody's saying? Arm's length, right? It's probably written in the legislature, but it's funny. Like, come on. The measures included in the fall economic statement Wednesday, estimated to cost $595 million over the next 5 years, are intended to open new avenues of financial support for domestic news organizations that produce, quote, a wide variety of original content. But the changes come on the heels of promises in the last spring budget to allocate $50 million over 5 years to support local journalism in underserved communities. Starting in January, people will be eligible for a new refundable tax credit to help both nonprofit and for-profit news outlets cover labor costs that come with producing, quote, original news content. A temporary, non-refundable 15% tax credit is also coming for subscribers of eligible digital news media. The credit is meant to encourage Canadians to change their reading habits and move to online platforms. Okay, so if you subscribe to an approved Canadian media channel, they'll give you a 15% tax credit. So you don't have to pay the HST. Yay! Like, how out of touch are these people? They're nuts. These people are crazy. Like, oh, it frustrates me no end. Okay, another credit will be, we will introduce a new business model for publishers to allow charitable and philanthropic contributions for, quote, trusted, professional, and eligible nonprofit journalism organizations. So this is also concerning to me. This is not the article, this is me. This allows anybody with money. So if you have an NGO set up by somebody with a whole lot of money, and if you don't know what an NGO is, it's a non-governmental organization, and George Soros owns a lot of them, Tides, and there's a couple other ones, Lead Now, and those people just have lots of money because they have lots of money to invest, and invested money just makes money just sitting there, right? Like sitting against the whatever equity they've got, they make money, dividends or whatever, they get payouts. So they use that money to fund these things, and then all of a sudden, instead of having a group of citizens doing it, you've got non-governmental organizations funneling money to promote, quote, journalism. Also known as propaganda. Like, this is absolutely going to be misused to funnel money to people who do not want Canada to have clear and concise factual news. It is an affront to journalism. It is an affront to our democracy. This whole thing is insane. Okay, back to the article. But despite the long-awaited announcement, details remain sparse on the eligibility criteria, contribution limits for charitable tax credit, and a working definition of what constitutes professional journalism. Those definitions and standards will be determined by an independent panel of journalists, the government said. A senior official told Huffpost Canada the measures are admittedly, quote, ill-defined, but will be developed and clarified before next year's federal budget. Jordan Peterson says, who defines the thing that is, in this case, the trustworthy news? And the answer is the person you least want to define it. That's the answer. I want news that survives the market. I don't want people subsidized. I don't want the government subsidizing the news to push their leftist ideology. Unbelievable. Back to the article. Quote, we want to be as arm's length as possible for the government to decide on eligibility and how that should work. And we want to push it to that process, the official said, adding it will be up to the panel, not the government, to iron out the details. Quote, we don't want any kind of impression that government is getting political, the officer said. The official said, we are pushing we're just putting a marker down that we believe in strong free press. Yeah, sure. The panel will be responsible for defining and promoting core journalism standards, defining what constitutes, quote, professional journalism, and proposing standards for tax credit eligibility. Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez, who is tasked with the challenge of finding diverse business models to help news outlets survive, brushed off the opposition's attacks as nothing more than a conspiracy theory. Here's the other tactic they're using, everybody. If you don't agree with them, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. You've been reading the internet too much and all that fake news, don't you know? Donald Trump's the enemy. It's insane. So they're throwing this out there to virtue signal of where their, quote, trust and responsible not fake news is going to land. If you don't agree with it, you're a conspiracy theorist. Back to the article. Following the fall economic update announcement, conservative finance critic Pierre I've got his name, Poilievre, wrong, told reporters that he was concerned about what the proposals would mean for, quote, independence of journalists. Quote, we think the media should be independent from the government. We should not have a situation where the government picks a panel and then decides who gets to report the news, he said. That's very dangerous. And I would agree. The rest of this article goes on to just explain why it's necessary. You know, our industry is dying and we definitely need money. Give us money, Ottawa. Huffpost agrees with you. Give us money. That's what they say. And CTV News reporting, this is moving back, I guess, to the Alberta story. The CTV News is reporting Ottawa on a different economic planet, Alberta Finance Minister. And I'm not going to go through this article, but this is an article widely panning the financial economic update that Mr. Morneau rolled out, and basically said, like, you know, this industry's dying, and he just confirmed it. And you gave $500 million, $600 million to the media. Yeah. So where do the Liberals' allegiance lie? At the media's feet. So here is Mr. Bernier asking Prime Minister Justin Trudeau about the Global Compact on Migration. And I was saying at the beginning of this video, the Prime Minister is very arrogant about this and tries to conflate the Global Compact on Migration with our old immigration system that used to work before Justin Trudeau took over and destroyed it. And again, he says here, this is in question period the other day, he says here that the Canadian population supports signing the Global Compact on Migration. I think we need to tell him that we do not, that we emphatically do not. But here's Mr. Bernier asking a question.
This government has been unable to solve the illegal migrants crisis. It plans to increase by 40% the number of immigrants we accept. And it is about to sign the Global Compact on regular migration, a United Nations plan to make mass migration normal and easier. Will the Prime Minister tell us if he still believes that Canada is a sovereign country that must protect its border and its identity? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is extraordinarily fortunate to be one of the few places in the world these days whose citizens are, for the most part, positive towards immigration. We know that immigration is a source of strength and resilience, has indeed created this country and its economic growth over the past decades. We know that continuing to defend a strong immigration system that follows the rules, that imposes our rules and our expectations is important to Canadians, and that is what we were doing. Whether people arrive regularly or irregularly, all the rules around our immigration system apply and are enforced.
And not true. So here is a news article from May of this year saying fewer than 1% of more than 28,000 irregular, read illegal, asylum seekers have been removed from Canada so far, while just over 28,000 asylum seekers have crossed the border into Canada illegally since the beginning of last year. Fewer than 1% of those have been removed from the country. Those figures come as senior government ministers maintain they expect that close to 90% of those who cross the border at unofficial ports of entry will see their application to stay fail. That means we know, and we knew in May, 90% of these people who are crossing illegally do not qualify for any status in Canada, yet we are putting them up in hotels and not removing them expediently. Why? What is the plan? The plan is to give them citizenship. That is the plan, 100%, and Trudeau knows it and doesn't care. That's the plan. That's the plan. So when he says it's working well, that's exactly because it's working to his plan. That's the problem. And how is he going to ensure that he wins next year's election? He just bought the press. That's the plan, right? You see? So are we going to stand up? In France, people are standing up dressed as traffic cones to Macron and his climate and gas taxes that he's just increased. Rules for Radicals, Saul Alinsky, check it out. This is a plan that has been in motion for a long time. We need to stand up. We need to say no. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have an excellent Thanksgiving for those in the States, and for those in Canada, have a wonderful Thursday. Maybe have a turkey sandwich for lunch. Thanks for watching, everybody.